Oh, hey there. I didn't see you come in. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of miRack modular patching. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be. Come on, guys, let's get into this.
Electronisounds Audio, the YouTube channel for you.
In yesterday's video, which was my first tutorial for miRack, we got started by building a really simple synthesizer, and we used a sequencer inside of miRack to sequence that synthesizer. We're going to continue on with that exact same project today, so if you missed that one, I'm going to put a link to the corner so you can go ahead and get all caught up with where we are now. We're going to focus on three things today. First thing we're going to do is we're going to connect a MIDI controller up to miRack so that we can play our synthesizers and our creations using a MIDI controller. The next thing we're going to do is explore a little bit of FM synthesis so you can hear some of the fantastically wild tones you can get out of miRack using some FM synthesis. And the last thing that we're going to be doing today, guys, is adding a few more oscillators to our simple synthesizer. Stick around, here we go. Be sure and subscribe if you're into this kind of content, guys. On this channel, I talk about everything from modular synthesis on iPad to making tracks with iPads. I talk about making tracks with hardware and making live jams, sound design, all that good stuff. Be sure and subscribe, guys. Here's what we're starting with today. I've got the session from yesterday open on the iPad, and I've got the Launch Key Mini from Novation here. Both of these are routed to my Novation Audio Hub 2x4 audio interface, but what audio interface you are using doesn't really make a difference here. I'm just showing how I have things routed. If you're not familiar with how to get your iPad connected up to an audio interface yet, I'm going to put a link to a video in the corner here where I talk about exactly how you can do that with different audio interfaces. Now, when you're going back to a project that you've worked on previously, if you just load that project and you do a whole bunch of tweaking in that project, maybe you make a mistake and you'd like to go back to where you started, that's kind of not going to happen, because when you exit, it's going to save that project by default. So, to get around overwriting something that you don't want to accidentally overwrite and give yourself complete freedom without fear of messing up something that's currently working, I really suggest that as you're starting your new projects, that you do that by duplicating where you last left off. So, for instance, I have a tutorial, make a simple synth. If I long press on that in the browser, it's going to give me the option to duplicate that session. And now it just labels it tutorial, make a simple synth 2. And so if I load that session up, and if I make a mistake here as I'm going and I want to be able to go back to where this was originally, I can always go back to the browser and load that original session because I've duplicated this one. Whereas if I don't do that and I do a whole bunch of changes here, and maybe when I'm done I decide I don't like them, or maybe I've made some mistakes and screwed some things up and would really like to get back to where I started, you're going to want to have that duplicated session in your browser. So I highly suggest making duplicates and backups of your sessions before you start working for the day, guys. What we're going to do first today is we're going to take out all of the modules that we don't need currently in miRack, and then we're going to insert what we do need to get connected up to a MIDI controller. Now, this is a mono environment, and we're not necessarily going to be able to hold down like big heavy chords on our MIDI controller per se. So me personally, I'm a lot more interested in using the internal sequencers to manage my sounds. I'm not really that interested in connecting up a controller to play mono synths inside of miRack, but I know a lot of people want to know how to do this, so that's what we're going to do first today, guys. We're just going to go ahead and double click on the sequencer module. We're going to click manage, or we're going to click delete. We can either leave the quantizer in, or we can delete that. We'll just double click, we're going to manage, and we're going to delete that. What we're going to do is we're also going to remove the cabling from our clock module. We'll go ahead and leave that in for now. And we're going to need to add a MIDI module so that we can tell miRack that we'd like to control it with a controller. And if we just go into the packs and MIDI and audio, here we have MIDI 1, and we'll go ahead and slide that in. Now you'll need to have some sort of a controller, connected to your iPad. So when you click on no device, it's going to list your controller here. I'm going to just choose Launch Key Mini LK MIDI Okay, and you can choose the MIDI channel if you have your controller set to a specific MIDI channel. And we're going to take the CV out of MIDI 1, and we're going to go into the voltage octaves on our oscillator. Excuse me. Whoop. And we're going to take the gate setting. Whoops, I'm moving the module. We're going to take the gate setting of this module, and we're going to plug that into the gate of our amplitude envelope. Now, when I press play, we are playing miRack, guys. One of the things that you'll note is, because this is a mono setup, is that when I hold one note and then hit the next note while holding the first note down, it sounds a little, not stellar. And that's because there's no portamento settings, there's no glide settings set up inside of this. I'm a very big modular beginner, in case you guys haven't figured that out yet. I'm assuming there's ways that we can, route that kind of stuff and modules for all of that in here. That's just an assumption. But for now, that's what it is. You can control your notes, and it's a mono synthesizer. But this isn't really how I want to be using miRack. So we're going to go ahead and reload the original session today so we can get back to controlling this with a sequencer. And then we're going to explore some FM synthesis sounds using this oscillator, guys. Let's check that out. Quick close-up on the MIDI module here, and you'll see that the CV is routed over here to the voltage octave in on our oscillator, and that the gate is routed over here to the gate on our amplitude envelope. Good stuff. All right. Okay, let's check out a little bit of FM synthesis in miRack, guys. Now, this is not going to be a tutorial about FM synthesis per se. I do know of a pretty fantastic tutorial on FM synthesis from Andrew Wong. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to his tutorial on FM synthesis up here in the corner. But what we're going to do today, guys, is just some really simple sound exploration. I'm going to go ahead and move these modules over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert an oscillator at which we can use a signal from to FM against this signal here. FM is like we're going to frequency modulate the frequency of a signal using the frequency of another signal. Let me show you exactly what I mean by that. We're going to go ahead and click the plus button here, and we're going to go ahead and insert, let's say this right here. This is just a standard VCO, just a voltage controlled oscillator, right? And what we're going to do is we'll start by taking, let's say, a square wave out of this oscillator, and we're going to run this. We're going to patch it into the FM port of our oscillator over here. Now I'm going to press play. We don't have direct sound today or anything like that. It's just what the iPhone is picking up right this very moment. I will plug into direct sound in a second so you guys can hear a little bit clearer what this sounds like. But for now, I just want to talk you through a little bit of it. What you can do here is you can change the frequency of the signal that is frequency modulating your source wave here. I don't think I'm saying that very well. This is all, pretty complex concepts that are a little bit new to me as well in this realm, so please forgive me. But what we'll do, guys, is I've got ourselves a new sequence programmed in the sequencer here. We're still snapped to the key of C minor. Let me check the volume. Don't want to be too loud on the speakers today. And now that we're running a signal into this FM patch point, if I move the FM, we can start to get some pretty bizarre and harsh tones. And what I think is really important to, if you double click on any of these knobs, it resets to their default position. What I think is important to note here, guys, is that the more you experiment with different waveforms and the FMing from, for instance, like you could use a sine wave, a triangle wave, a saw wave to FM against whatever is here. And depending on the frequency that you send your modulating wave into this oscillator at, and depending on how much you're FMing this, you're going to get an extreme variety. I can say that one more time, guys. An extreme variety of tones, okay? Now, these can be beautiful tones that you can, stumble on some super bizarre happy accidents when some frequencies collide, or you can get things that are so dirty and nasty that it makes makes you want to turn the whole thing off and run away. So you certainly want to be careful when you're doing this, and you certainly, probably don't want to have your speakers on like to a super high volume when you're messing around with FM. Let's go ahead and check this out, guys. Actually, I'll plug into direct sound now, and then I'll just mess around with changing the wave in here and changing the frequency of this oscillator, and you'll hear all the different type of tones that we can get out of this. Hopefully some of them will be interesting. Before I switch to direct sound, I want to show you guys this little icon up here in the top, which you'll find next to the CPU icon. If we click this, it puts the knobs at a very fine resolution. So for instance, if I grab my finger and I put it on a knob, at this point it's a really, fast moving. I can double click and reset that. But if we click this fine resolution icon over here, you'll see that now the knob moves in a very slow and finite amount. And you can get some really finite adjustments this way. So as I mess with the FM synthesis here, I'm probably going to be using this mode as well, just so you know how we're doing this. One more thing, I just want to state that as we're listening to these, really put your techno listening cap on, guys, and imagine these sounds, in that sort of a context, as you're looking for that, really unique and original sound or tone that's going to take your listeners to a whole new place. Now keep in mind, guys, the only waveform that we were using today was just a square wave, and that you can get different sounding results from different oscillators and then from different waves on this side as well. If you use a saw wave, you're going to get different results. If you use a sine wave out of this, you're going to get different results, etc. Let's go ahead and add some more oscillators to our synthesizer, guys. Before we start adding the extra oscillators to our synthesizer, I'd like to go ahead and add a VU meter to our session here. It's a neat module that I found last night while playing in miRack. We're going to go ahead and disconnect the audio output here, and we're going to click the plus icon. In the packs section, we're going to go to Bog Audio, and let's see here. Over here in the third row on the right, we have a VU meter. We're going to go ahead and slide that over here. Whoops. Put the limiter back where we want it here. I'm going to take the left out from the limiter, and we're going to bring that into the left in of the VU meter, the right out of the limiter into the right in of the VU meter. Then we'll just patch the left and the right into our audio output. And this is going to allow us to get a visual representation of our audio level, you know, so that we have a good idea of what we're actually working at and what sort of headroom we've got inside of the amp. I really recommend putting a VU meter right before your audio out, so you've got, you know, another level, you know, meter, so that you can see, you know, where your levels are at. I know we've got one here on the mixer, but, you know, it's a little bit small, and I really like the way that this one shows what you've actually are sending out of your audio output. Let's go ahead and delete this extra oscillator that we were using for exploring FM, because we don't really need that right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to move our sequencer over a little bit and our quantizer over a little bit, and we're going to make room to add some extra oscillators in this section over here. Today we're going to go ahead and just add more of the same oscillator, but keep in mind this is half the fun of modular, exploring the different, you know, modules yourself and learning about the different modules. Sometimes it's fun to explore them without learning about them first and just sort of see what you can get out. We're going to go ahead and click the plus button here, and in the see in the tag section, we're going to go to oscillators. And we're going to just go ahead and choose this one again. Again, this is based on the Mutable Instruments Braids oscillator. And we'll do that one more time. So now that we've got a total of 3 oscillators here, what we'll need to do is make sure that we've got, you know, a control voltage sending to all 3 oscillators. So we can see here that we've sent an out from our quantizer into the voltage octave on our first oscillator. So we're going to just copy that same sort of patching. We're going to patch from the voltage octave here to the out of our quantizer, and the same thing on our third oscillator. Now all 3 of our oscillators are receiving control voltage information, which is that note information. We're still quantizing our notes through the quantizer to a scale of C minor. And what we're going to do is we're going to need a way to hear all 3 of these modules. Let me go ahead and scoot these over just a little bit. So we're going to insert a tiny little mixer so that we can route these, and then we can mix the levels together individually and create our sounds. We're going to go ahead and click the plus there. And over here in the pack section, we'll go to, in the tags section rather, we'll go to mixer. And again, here what you choose is, you know, up to you, and how you sculpt your patches is going to be, you know, an art form onto itself for you. We're going to go ahead and grab this Audible Instruments mixer because I like the way it looks. And we're going to run all 3 of our audio outs from each oscillator into one of these inputs. So oscillator 1 into the input 1. Oscillator 2 into the input 2, and oscillator 3's output into the input 3. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to need a way to route all 3 of these signals together back into our amplitude envelope. So we're going to go ahead and use a multiple to do that. We're going to click the plus icon here, and we're going to select in the tags section. Actually, I'll just go to Bog Audio. I believe this is a Bog Audio one as well, and we're looking for the one that says multiples. There's quite a few to choose from. In fact, here's one down here at the bottom, but that's not the one that I'm looking for. Turns out it was not in the Bog Audio section, so I'm just back in tags and multiple, and it's actually the first one is the one that I'm looking for. And so here we have it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take an output from 1 into, we want, let's see if I can move this cable out of the way here so that it doesn't, there we go. What we want is we want to use 3 inputs and, convert those all together, sum that signal into one output signal. So we're going to take 1 into the first, patch point here, 2 into the second one, and 3 into the third one. Now, this is getting a little bit complex today, guys, and if you feel that you've missed a step, you can always pause. You can always, double check your routing and, zoom in and verify the cabling here. We're going to take the output of the multiples and we're going to run that into the input of our mix 1 over here. And that's all there is to it, guys. Now, when I press play, it's going to be playing. I'm going to go ahead and what we need to do is just 1 click on each of these volume buttons, okay, on the mixer, and that brings the volume through. And now the volumes are acting as we would expect, and we have individual level control over each oscillator here. And now basically we're getting into sound design, where you can choose which oscillators, which waveforms rather, you'd like to run out of each oscillator. You can do that in real time here. Maybe use 3 different ones. This is where sound design comes in, how you choose to, design your sounds and what waveforms you choose to use, whether they're the same waveforms or whether they're different waveforms. And then you can now you could use the oscillator that we had in earlier and route that to any or all of these and do FM synthesis on any or all of these. All sorts of options start opening up. You could use multiple different oscillators to achieve different sounding results. You name it, the sky's the limit. I think that's probably about enough information for today, guys. That's 3 more topics that we've covered inside of miRack. We're definitely going to be back to this project in another tutorial where we'll be adding some effects to this and some other, modules and goodies. And until next time, thanks for watching.